Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch 2020, our new show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Damon Hatfield, and this week I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Howdy.
And Lucy O'Brien from IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Hello.
This week we'll discuss what Ghost of Tsushima's release date might tell us and the possibility of two different PlayStation 5 models. And of course we'll have last week's poll results and a new poll for you. But first, Sony's silence on the PlayStation 5 is deafening. Sony will not say anything about the PlayStation 5.
You know, it's almost looking a little prescient at this point in light of E3's cancellation, and everybody's plans are being thrown up in the air. Microsoft seemingly was prepared for this with their announcement this week, saying right away, as soon as E3 got canceled, they said, hey, we're going to have a digital event. We'll be ready. So they seemingly had an envelope B backup plan ready to go. But yeah, it's now Sony. It has been frustrating, but at least they have the luxury of kind of just rolling right into this and not having to kind of shuffle things.
We already knew Sony wasn't going to be at E3.
Yeah.
But they haven't sort of told us what's going to replace that time.
No. I mean, I think that Sony is in a perfectly fine position to be quiet right now. Okay. The PS4 is on track to top 110 million units sold. That is a massive, massive number. Also, let's not forget that the PS4 has an incredible lineup of exclusives in the first half of this year. Sure. I think Sony is very much concentrating on the end of the PlayStation 4's life cycle before pivoting to the PS5 after Ghost of Tsushima's release.
I see. So we just found out that release date recently. That's June 26th for Ghost of Tsushima, and that's sort of like the last of the big Sony first-party PlayStation 4 exclusives that we know of.
Yep.
The ones that we've been seeing that we saw at E3 for several years in a row.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting that they would put it out just less than 1 month after The Last of Us 2, which is their quadruple A mega title. Yeah. But I wonder, nobody ever puts AAA games out in July for whatever reason, whether it's people traveling, vacationing, they're not going to buy games, whatever. And then maybe just Sony decided they wanted to stay out of August, because then you're getting near stuff like Avengers and Cyberpunk. I don't know. But it is interesting that by the time the second half of 2020 starts, the PS4 slate is clean. It's clear.
But that's it. So that way there's plenty of hype to build up the PS5. Like the whole messaging from Sony, no doubt, is going to be about the PS5 in the second half of the year. And PlayStation 4 has the first half, PS5 has the second. I think it's a smart move.
Well, I guess why people are starting to get a little bit frustrated is because with the PlayStation 4, Sony started promoting that much earlier.
Of course.
Right. If we go back to 2013.
And that plan worked to utter perfection. I mean, yes, you had Microsoft sort of stumbling their way through 2013, but everything about the PS4 rollout went wonderfully in a vacuum, just from Sony's side. They communicated that February 2013 event where they announced the PlayStation 4 and talked about how friendly it is for developers and announced a whole screen, just a montage of developers. They were clear about this is an x86 architecture console. We've heard you. We're getting rid of Cell. We're going with a more PC-focused setup, and the messaging was so clear and so good that I think it's not so much the silence, maybe, of 2020. It's you guys did everything right this way in 2013. So what's going on?
I mean, like Sony did have the benefit as well. You mentioned it briefly, Ryan. 2013, Xbox One stumbled so seriously out of the gate that it really did feel like they kind of gave Sony a win, and that was really sort of hammered home at E3 in 2013, where there was that kind of like just knockout blow of the price of the $399 price point, and of course the messaging that hey, you can share games. This is still a physical medium, etc., etc. And then of course in Gamescom we got the release date. So it was a very, very, very sort of elegant marketing strategy in 2013, and we're obviously not seeing that this year.
Sure, but back in 2013, that marketing began in February.
It did.
With PlayStation Meeting, I think they called it.
That's effectively, a 9-month go from February to
exactly.
November release?
It's called the See the Future event in New York.
And I don't think they showed the console there yet, but they revealed a bunch of hardware details, showed off some games that were in development. So that's why a lot of people were thinking that this year in February, Sony would do something similar, but of course, February came and went. So Lucy, you think they're going to wait until the back half of the year,
I do.
July, to start talking about PlayStation 5?
I do. I think that Sony is in a very comfortable position right now. I don't think they need to rush their messaging. I'm not sure that Microsoft at this point can do anything to kind of rush their hand, so to speak. I'm not sure how you feel, Ryan, but I feel like, considering what's out there now, the messaging that Microsoft has put forward, which is very, very positive, the narrative is being led by Microsoft. If Sony hasn't, gone, oh, damn, we've got to say something now, I don't think that they're going to say anything until, their planned date.
I think Sony's challenge is that even though we don't have an official E3, we're clearly going to have something. In June, multiple publishers will be doing digital events. And publishers and developers are going to want to talk about their next-gen games, and I guess they still can, but I don't know if they'll say PS5, yes, this is PS5, and I guess there's nothing stopping them from doing so, but they're certainly not going to be able to show it off on the PS5 if we still haven't seen it and had it officially shown and announced. So, it's possible that Microsoft might have a little bit more of that mind share time to itself, which is what Sony had in 2013, while Microsoft twiddled their thumbs from February till May when they finally had their event. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in this new kind of vacuum of June and what that is going to look like for everybody.
Sure, yeah. And then there's the possibility that you brought up at the top of the show with the effects of coronavirus being felt all over the world in the entertainment industry. There's a chance that Sony could be experiencing manufacturing issues. They could be considering pushing back the release of PlayStation 5.
Do you think it'll happen, Lucy?
I mean, again, this is something that, I don't know enough about when it comes to actual manufacturing and how the coronavirus is affecting that. We can safely assume that it will, in some capacity.
Sure.
I think there is a scenario that the PlayStation 5 launch goes ahead, but obviously it will be distributed in very sort of minimal amounts and become really, wanted like the Wii was originally.
Sure.
I don't know whether that will be a good thing or a bad thing in terms of the sort of PlayStation 5 messaging. I don't know. I think it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world we mood of today is kind of chaotic anyway. But yeah, that is definitely a possibility.
Yeah, you're right. We also don't know any PS5 launch titles.
Yeah.
Whereas we do know one for the Xbox Series X.
We know the big one.
For sure. Yeah, the big one.
Yeah.
So, Sony, to your point, Lucy, about Sony's success this generation, they are in a privileged position. They could delay till spring if that's what it came to, and they could give their PS5 launch titles some more time to bake in the oven. But that could also, if Microsoft can come out strong, as so far they've been doing everything right. If Halo comes out big, and gosh, we're hoping it. I sure hope as a Halo fan it's going to. Mm-hmm. Then if Microsoft is able to go ahead, even I agree with you. I think a limited supply, or maybe not doing a global launch, and maybe Europe has to wait, and US and Japan in the case of the PS5, not the Xbox One Series X, obviously. But yeah, I wonder if we might see a non-global launch and just a supply limitation rather than a straight-up delay.
Exactly, and not to put a positive spin on a global pandemic, which is what we're going through today. Mm-hmm. But maybe that could be to Sony's benefit in terms of that messaging about it being really in high demand. I don't know.
Could be.
It definitely worked for the Wii.
Yeah, a lot of questions.
Let's talk briefly about the possibility of two SKUs, two different models for the PlayStation 5. Heavily rumored for Xbox, not confirmed that there's going to be a Lockhart model.
It's open secret. It's
a less expensive model than the high-end Series X. There's also rumors that Sony is considering the same thing for PlayStation 5. Is that something you would expect them to do? Because they already have the PS4 Pro and the regular PS4.
I think absolutely, and I think that Sony would definitely benefit from that, especially because I've always been a firm believer that Sony has the better exclusives and can actually sell consoles based on those exclusives, and if they've got a cheaper model, then they're going to sell more consoles.
That's true.
It'll be interesting to see where it would land on the power spectrum if that happens, because Microsoft's already planted the flag in the ground. Hey, we have a really, really high-performance 12 teraflop Series X machine here. It's probably going to have a price tag reflective of that, and then the Series S, as we've been calling it on Locked, or the Project Lockhart, coming in at a lower price. What that lower price is and what the power and performance is on that remains to be seen, but will Sony effectively just kind of match those, or will we see a sort of a staggered thing where could Sony maybe have a more powerful lower end model and a less powerful higher end model, or vice versa? It's there's so many options on the table that it's going to be really interesting to see how this all shakes out.
Yeah, and I do just want, in addition to that, I do want to add that I think PlayStation 5 has more brand awareness for the casual consumer, and when I say the casual consumer, I mean like grandparents who are going out and buying a console for their grandkids, right? They know what a PlayStation is. The Xbox Series X isn't going to have the same power of brand recognition as PlayStation 5, and if they see that the PlayStation 5 has a cheaper model, costs less, they're going to go for it.
Well, we continue to wait for any word from Sony about PlayStation 5. Selfishly, I hope they don't wait until July, because it'll make playing this show week to week a little bit more difficult. Last week, we asked the IGN audience what features you're most excited about for your next-gen console. Yusuf has our poll results.
Coming in at number 3 with 14.3% of the vote, you want the original quality of life features, trimming away the unnecessary, frustrating bits to games by adding features like the Series X's quick resume and smart delivery. But now coming in at number 2 with 32% is frame rate, or FPS to the initiated. Frame rate is how often the image is refreshed on the screen, and if that drops, you have problems such as choppy movements, frozen screens, or frame skips. Not to mention, this always happens at the worst time. Taking the top spot with only 0.7% more is, wait for it, loading times. It looks like that obstacle is being rectified with reports that both the upcoming Xbox Series X and PS5 will have SSDs, so that means less time waiting and more time doing what you want, and that's playing games. What features do you care about in the next-gen console?
I have to agree, reducing loading time sounds wonderful, but exactly how are the next-gen consoles going to be cutting down on all that waiting time? IGN's tech editor Bo Moore can explain.
Thanks, Damon. Waiting sucks, right? But loading screens are everywhere in games. Even games that seem to transition seamlessly from area to area often use tricks to hide that they're loading up the next section. Have you ever spent some time in an unreasonably long elevator ride? Yeah, that was a loading screen in disguise. Thankfully, one of the most tangible upgrades that we'll get in the next generation is the move from traditional hard disk drives to fast SSD storage. Solid-state drives, or SSDs for short, use flash memory to store data instead of magnetic spinning disks. SSDs are faster and more resistant to physical trauma than their hard disk brethren, but they're also a lot more expensive. SSD prices have thankfully become much more affordable in recent years, but they still cost a minimum of around 10 cents per gigabyte. That's roughly $100 for a 1 terabyte drive, while hard drives can be had for less than half or even a quarter of that price. PC gamers have enjoyed SSD storage for years, but even the mid-cycle upgrades of the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X still stuck to regular old hard drives. With the move to SSDs on the PS5 and Xbox Series X, console gamers will finally reap the benefits of modern storage technology. Sony and Microsoft haven't divulged any specs about the SSDs in their next-gen consoles, though a closed-door demo showing off Spider-Man load times on the PS5 compared to the PS4 Pro did leak online last year. In that demo, the PS5 loaded up in less than a second, while the PS4 Pro took 8.1. Now, this doesn't mean that loading times will be entirely gone in the next gen. Some games, especially big open-world games like Grand Theft Auto, might still take a couple dozen seconds to start up. But once you've knocked out that initial load, expect to spend a lot less time waiting in elevators. Back to you, Damon.
Thanks, Bo. For next week, we want to know if next-gen consoles have multiple versions, which model do you plan to get? Make sure to vote at IGN.com, and we'll share the results with you next week. And that will pretty much do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch 2020. Thank you, Ryan, Lucy, Bo, and Yusuf. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern with more PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X news. See you then.